Εδώ σήμερα για αυτήν την ωραία βραδιά. Η Σοφία Κόστος ήρθε από τα Φιλαδέλφια για το χατήρι όλων εμάς.
Να είμαι Ελληνίδα. I don't stop being Greek. That is what I said to a Greek historian from Greece, who when he asked me, where are your parents from? And I said, they're from Antioch. And he said, why are you so interested in Asia Minor? And I said then, Pavo na είμαι Ελληνίδα. Okay. I didn't know anything about the genocide for a long time. And some of it was my fault, because I didn't want to know about the genocides, because I had a neighbor when I was a young mother who lived down the hall. Her husband was the doctor and she was the nurse, and they were Polish Jews. And she would come over to me from time to time feeling, let me come into your house, I'd have to relax, to calm down. And I'd say, sure, come on in, Amalia. Well, little by little, I learned her stories about how she and her husband survived the Nazi occupation in Poland. And from that day on, I didn't want to know the word genocide. And my son kept saying to me, Mom, you got to read Marjorie Hausimpy and Dawkins' book. It's wonderful. It tells everything about what all the Greeks went through. And I said, and Armenians. And I said, no, I don't want to know about it. I was that crazy. And then one day, Dean said, Mom, I'm invited to Washington, D.C. This was 15 years ago. And he said, I've been invited to read my poem, which he wrote for his grandparents. A marvelous poem. And when, of course, I went as a proud mother. It was the 75th anniversary of the or commemoration of the genocide. It was outside the Capitol building. If anybody went there, it's by the stairway. And when I sat there, of course, I heard my son. But then I heard 4 hours in the hot sun with the different speakers speaking that day, Armenians, Assyrians, Greeks. But then at the end, this man came on the microphone and he said, you're all invited to the hotel across the street for a reception. So my then husband, my now husband actually, said to me, let's go. Okay, we went. And when I went inside, I saw these big pictures on the wall, and I thought, oh good, I'm a photographer, I'd love to see pictures. But when I saw the pictures, I was blown away. These were all of the atrocious things that happened to the poor survivors, the ones who could have survived, of what happened then. Hangings, starvations, beyond hangings, the things that just, I don't even want to think about it right now. But you know the pictures, I'm sure. Now we have me now more shocked and furious at myself, because now I realize how stupid I was. And I went over to the man who was putting this show together, or the reception together, and he introduced himself, and now he's my friend. His name was Bill Theodosakis. And I said, oh, please, write down the names of the books that these pictures came from. I want to read them. And he very quietly said, you won't find them. They've been stolen out of libraries. They're no longer in bookstores. And the ones you'll find are used and they're very expensive. And the Armenians buy them before the Greeks get to them. Well, he doesn't know I have pisma, which means termination. And I decided to get hold of those books, and the ones that were still in print, not in print, but still available, I was able to get hold of. And I read them, and I was telling people in my church, and they didn't know about this. And I said, oh, okay, how about if I make Xerox copies of the books? But you'll have to pay me for my Xerox. They said, sure. So, like, really, they were hungry for this. I went ahead and made copies. I got paid. End of story. No. Then I decided to get behind my computer and take excerpts from the books, certain passages that really were too beyond. And I wanted people to know about it. So I started typing. I hate to type, by the way. but I was typing away and sending out emails, and I call these voices of truth, these excerpts from the books. And the voices of truth were very stunning. But I thanked, trying to get my train of thought right now. Sorry. I'm excited. And I'm happy for this opportunity right now, believe me. All right, so I had these, so anyway, the excerpts from the book, I started typing, then I started sending them out to people, and before I knew it, I had people from, you didn't know me at the time, Sevi, but I had people who were writing to me, praising me, I saved those praises, by the way, and saying, please, here's a list of my friends, add this to your list. I had people from Germany, from England, from Australia, from Canada, and of course the United States, and Greece. I think I might have missed one or two, but that's how important it was to them. All right, once I had the book, that done, some of the books finally were reprinted because the 75-year limit of copyright limits was off and they could reprint them. So I had these books now, people weren't being able to buy them, so I decided I don't have to do this anymore. I will adjust, I'm getting distracted, I'm sorry. This is hard on me. This is not easy on me, thank you. I'm very sincere about what I'm doing, okay? I didn't come from Philadelphia for no reason. Thank you.
And you started having awareness of genocide.
Oh, wait, so now,
all
right, so the books were out and I decided not to do this anymore. But then meanwhile I was studying photography. I had already studied photography. I was studying videography. And I was told then meanwhile one of the people on my list was Dr. Charlie Majubian, who was a dentist, retired, and in his 90s. And I wrote to him and I said, can I come over and do a video of you? He said, sure. So he and his wife and his daughter invited me for dinner and I had dinner with them. And that night he said to me, Sofia, you want to know about the genocides, know that the newspapers in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Evening Bulletin, was very kind to the Armenians, very kind. And you can go to their archives and find newspaper articles. And I was thrilled. So I went to the place he told me, which I'm not telling you because when I found out this was not an official type of stuff, they had old newspaper clippings that they put in envelopes. So when I took them out of the envelopes, they were almost falling apart. I was beside myself. But I made Xeroxes, I started typing, and I had this information. But while I was at the community college where I was studying videography, I was in the library, and I saw this big shelf of books from the New York Times Index. And the index is, oh, I said, wow. So I went in there, and I just want to make one correction tonight. The year that I started with was 1822. I said, I'll start from there, and then I went up all the way to 1922, and 23, and 26. But 1820, but there were these, they were like numbers, and then you had to go to a machine, and you got the film, and then you have to put it in the machine, and you have to drop quarters, and then you go home and you start typing. Again, I was getting great praises of letters thanking me. So I realized this thirst for knowledge, and this is in my lifetime, and I'm not a child. And by the way, George, I met you tonight. You are my great help because you're younger than all of us in here, and you're the one who's going to carry on this information. Nobody's going to bullshit you, and I use that word properly, because that's what is happening now. And it's an insult to our intelligence, but but it was by design. This is the biggest thing I can tell you. It was by design that we were not supposed to know by now. It was meant for us not to know, and therefore they could lie to us all they wanted to. Thanks to the internet, thanks to the fact that we communicate in a different way, in a better way now, and therefore, and somebody like me who comes along wants to sit at the typewriter or the computer. Anyway, there it is. So I read the books, I did the newspaper reports, and I had a lot of them. At some point, I got an email from Dr. Denis Papazian, the Armenian director of the University of Michigan. And he wrote, "Are you planning on doing a book?" I hadn't. But I didn't tell him I hadn't. I just said, "I'm not ready." And so I said, "But I'll be glad to give it to you as soon as I'm ready." Well, of course, I was now thinking more like getting ready for him. But I said, "Before you do, though, would you put my work on your website?" So that's how my work went on the University of Michigan's website. So I'm going into this story so you can see how one person like me, who has other things to do, her photography, her sculpture, she's now changing her whole mindset to making sure that she's not stupid, and also that other people will not be stupid about this. And I went ahead. I have to drink some water though, excuse me. I'll get to the point. I'm getting to the point yet, but I had to build up to this.
Don't worry, I'm used to it. She gets to the point.
But it's an important point.
Turning point.
And there is a turning point. Thank you. So the turning point was really in the beginning, and it kept turning and turning. So now I have the information out with the newspapers, and then one day I get this phone call. Oh, then when I was ready for Denis Papazian, he said, "I'm sorry, I'm no longer the director." So that was end, right there. Then I get a call from this gentleman, or I call him, and he tells me he's interested. Then I said, honestly, because I hadn't edited my work, and I knew I had misspellings and so on, I said, I have to re-edit my work. And so while you were waiting, things were happening, and then when you were ready, you were no longer president, or I was ready. So that ended there, so I thought. Then a historian friend of mine came along and said, "Sofia, use my publisher. He's an Assyrian." So I had now from Armenian to Greek, Assyrian, so we stayed in the family. So my Assyrian publisher now has my book. But what I really want to get into now, what I did with the book, I didn't just simply put in news reports. Anybody who wants to type can do that. I added footnotes. I added references to the news reports. I added photographs. I brought life to the book. My preface was about 30-some pages, and it took me the whole summer of 2010 to work on that preface. What I wanted to do was to engage my reader, and I hope you read it, George, so you can get to know about it. But I think you'll be very interested and engaged in it, and you'll want to know more, and it'll suck you in. Okay, now I'm into what I was about to say. Things like, I want to read some of the headlines that I read. There were lots of headlines, but some of these, will this grab your attention and say that this happened or didn't happen? Turks' insane savagery. 10,000 Greeks dead. Unspeakable Turk. Turks will be Turks. Turks set fires, missionary says. Turkish atrocities. More Turkish atrocities. Predicts great massacre in history. Crimes of Turkish misrule. Tell of Turkish outrages. Black Friday. Turks proclaim banishment edict to 1 million Greeks. Now, until 1944, the word genocide did not exist in the English language. And I'll just want to say that the man who came up with the idea was a Polish Jew, and he coined the word genocide. Prior to his introducing that term, some of the words used to describe the killings of large groups of unarmed and innocent people were, and these are the words that were used in the newspapers. They didn't say genocide, but they said other words. They said outrages. Now, they never said the word rape. I only saw the word rape one time, because back then society was more polite and avoided that word. Race murder, wholesale massacres, wholesale drownings, atrocities, carnage, organized persecutions, destructions, murderous orgy, slaughters, organized butchery, calculated starvations, catastrophe, multitudinous crime, murder of a nation, impaled alive, the greatest horror in history, Holocaust. The word Holocaust was used, and I want you to say that word because that's what it was. The Jews have said it's their word. They said that the Holocaust is only Jewish, and it's not. It was already a Greek word, and it was used back then before the Jewish Holocaust. That's important. Whether or not Turkish leaders deny their aggressive acts, these facts prevail. The Ottoman Turco oppression lasted from the fall of Constantinople in 1943 to 1829. But in some parts of Greece and Asia Minor, the oppression continued to well more than 500 years, until 1922 to 23. In 1955, on the night of September 6th, in what is known as the Night of Terror and Crystal Night, brutal Turkish mobs directed by Turkish authorities ran wild in key cities of Turkey as Turkish police looked on. The burning of Christian churches, defecating on, urinating on, and desecrating graves, tombs, and religious relics, beating and circumcising priests on the streets, not in the hospital, on the streets, defiling women and children, smashing and looting 1,000 homes and 4,500 shops, 21 factories, 110 hotels, 26 schools, and 73 churches of the Greeks and Armenians living in Istanbul. Today it's called Istanbul, but it was Constantinople. Metropolitan Bishop Gerasimos of Pamphilus was beaten, burned with lit cigars, and dragged through the streets. And yet they get very upset if we make a cartoon. During the 1964 Turkish invasion of Cyprus, the Turkish Air Force dropped napalm bombs on villages in Cyprus, killing unarmed civilians and destroying entire villages. And again in 1974, Turkish soldiers deliberately murdered and raped the Greek women of Cyprus. They invaded their homes, bayoneted infants in their cribs, abducted children, and outrageously took